who the chair and vice chair are of the committee itself.
Not me.
I thought Dawn was the chair.
I don't know. I don't know who was the chair of the committee, to be honest with you. I know who's on the committee from. I know it's the chair of the FinCom, the chair of the select board, and then one other member. And Matt asked me, and I said, "No, you're not on it. You're not on the audit committee."
Okay, that makes my life easier.
Said, "Oh, okay." And I went and looked and said, "Oh, Matt, you really are on the audit committee."
Yeah, it doesn't say who's the chair.
It doesn't say on the website.
In the act for it
Just two
doesn't say.
members.
Matt's here, let's make him chair.
Nope.
You want to start? Well, do you want to start the meeting?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I mean, if Dawn's gonna get stuck anyway, so, and she is gonna hear it later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Can we pull the agenda up for?
Call to order,
Yeah.
roll call.
There's no, I don't think there's a roll call. Or, yeah, there is.
Martin's not coming, right?
No. I didn't invite Martin.
He's probably at in Falmouth anyway, the Mass Bowl thing.
I'm ready if you are.
I am ready.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to call it to order?
Oh, you want me to call? I'll call the meeting. I don't know if I can, but
No, I don't think you can.
I don't think I can.
I think Matt
I'll
can.
call
He's
to
the,
order.
he's
All
the
right.
acting
call to
chair
order.
for this meeting.
There we go.
How's that?
I'm acting. There we go. Act like a chair.
Act like a chair, Matt.
I'll make the announcement that this meeting is being audio and videotaped.
Okay.
Excellent.
And then I think that
Yep.
you need to approve the agenda.
All right. I'd like to motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Okay.
Is
Is there any public comment?
there
Okay.
So we'll move right on. So with us today, Matt, I think Denise has never met Tony until today, but I know Matt, you've been at some of the presentations to the select board. So with us is Tony Roselli from our independent audit firm, Roselli Clark and Associates. We're here to discuss the fiscal 23 audit. Tony has done a PowerPoint presentation that we'll take you through, and then we will walk through the management letter comments, and we'll give you an update on the town's responses to those and where we're at with them.
Great.
And answer any questions along the way as well. So I will turn it over to you, Tony.
Super. Actually, myself and Matt go back to what, 2013 or so, right?
Yeah.
You were on the very first. You appointed the auditors. I think you were on the FinCon. I think.
Yeah. I've been around for a while.
Scrubs on.
Yeah. I've been around for a while. My bakery closed.
I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
So for those who do not know who I am, my name is Tony Roselli, and I am a partner with the accounting firm of Roselli Clark and Associates, who is the independent auditor for the town of Nantucket. We've been doing the audit for several years, probably going back to 2013, okay, I just mentioned to Matt. And we've seen that steady progress. Just to preface my presentation, we've seen it when we first came here. There was the management letter was about 30 pages. There was a lot of problems. There was just the reserves were low, and it's just been nothing but good things since then. So it's been a really nice trajectory for the town, both financially and in terms of internal controls. So at that time, the DLS had gotten involved. You were on a watch list. So there was a lot of things going on that weren't so pleasant back then, that have basically all been rectified, other than some things that come up every year. It's a very, very large organization. There's a lot of moving parts. So there's always things that pop up. It's very difficult to just control the whole thing. Overall, though, great job by the financial team. Everything was prepared, waiting for us. We basically got the work done pretty much on time, except for waiting for some things from external parties. So the town did file their single audit on time, filed all their official disclosure statements on time. So everything's going as planned. So we can get into some of the presentation at this point. The first slide I always like to do, where are we financially? Financially, you can see back, I went back all the way to the Great Recession back in 2008-9. and you were just about around $5 million in reserve balances. And your reserve balances, Denise, for you who is new, is basically your stabilization funds plus the undesignated fund balance in your general fund. And usually that's the free cash, the undesignated. So we basically add that to the stabilization. That becomes the full reserve balance. You can see that it was about 5 million back in 2009, and it is almost 45 million in 2023. So in those 14 years, it's grown like 900%, which is phenomenal. Just a very and we have a guest.
Hey, Dawn.
We'll wait for Dawn to be seated. So, Dawn, this is the first slide, so you haven't missed one.
Okay, great.
And so the reserve balances, like I said, have gone from the 5 million in 2009, Great Recession, all the way to 45 million. And that's just basically really good forecasting, very good management of your expenditures, getting turned back every year. Your revenues consistently are greater than budget or forecast. Brian, you go out, what, 5 or 7 years on your revenue forecast? So
we go out 7.
Yes.
We use the previous 5 years of action
So
to try to budget.
great forecasting, great forecasting tools. It shows you if there's an alert out there, you still got that red light, green light, yellow light, caution. So it'll tell you where there's an alert that you have to address. Just a really nice process. The town was rewarded with a AAA from Moody's, which is very difficult to get. That was back in 18 or 19, somewhere in that area. 18, so all good stuff. Second slide here is the reserve ratio, how it compares to the high-end metrics. So when your bond rating people come in and want to talk to you and go through all your financials, they're looking for about somewhere between 15 and 20% of your reserve ratio. And your reserve ratio is that calculation I talked about earlier, where you take your undesignated plus your stabilization fund and you divide it by your total expenses. And Nantucket's at about 40%. So you're close to 2 to 3 times the high-end metric and well above the state average, which is somewhere around 10%. So in terms of how you compare, you compare very favorably.
And one of the things I would say is that while it's extremely high, we have been somewhat purposeful in doing that. In the presentations to the rating agencies, one thing that they always harped on was potential storm and what would happen if we had a storm that wiped out a lot of our operations. And during that presentation, we presented to them that we are intentionally keeping it a little higher so that we have that coverage to be able to react if anything ever happens. So that's why you see something that high, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government's done a great job of coming to the rescue if there's a disaster. But if in a situation where they weren't able to come to the rescue or couldn't say something rose to the level of an emergency, the town would be on the hook for that. And rather than go out and try to get $100 million of debt, the town has some reserves that can buffer that. And I think, Brian, we went back to what, Hurricane Bob, maybe back in
100 years, actually.
Yeah, just to see what the worst storms were, try to develop a history and see, if really, and I think Hurricane Bob was the worst one back in 92 or 3, it was about 30 million, I think, in damage to the island. And so that's kind of like, and that's inflation adjusted. That's kind of like where the town was trying to get to, and basically what they communicated to Moody's. Here's what we're using as our base. This is the worst storm we've ever had in 129 years, and we're making sure we can at least cover something like that.
I have a question about the AAA. The land bank had, if I read it right, in the balance sheet, they were worth about $500 million of assets.
Yeah.
Which is about half of our assets, if I looked at it right.
Yeah.
And so how do they impact the AAA? Is that a huge positive for us? Or do you think it's?
They don't actually impact ours. They actually get the benefit of our AAA.
Right.
So it works in reverse. They don't impact anything because none of it is merged in.
Right.
But because they're a component unit of the county, they get the benefit of our increased rating.
I got you. So they get when they borrow, they
They
get the
get,
increased
they get
rate.
the benefit of the rating, but their financials don't impact us in any way.
So when they're rating it, they don't look at that.
No,
I
no.
got you.
The only thing they would look at is if the land bank's financials were negative,
Yeah.
you get punished for that.
You
But if
get-
they're positive, it's kind of like, you know, that's off to the side. So they do ask questions about the land bank. And because it has such a significant level of assets, not only fixed assets, but cash, and it's well,
And it's gonna help us in coastal resiliency. We've
Yep.
put land aside. We've got a situation that's very different than a lot of places because we've done it a long time.
yeah.
So when we're having those conversations, I think it's a huge net positive. So anyway.
So we've talked about a lot of this, except for the last bullet, which is just continuing to walk that line between reserves and levy capacity. So the town's done a nice job of having a fair amount of levy capacity for a number of years, even though you've had some growth. And you've had you know, some need for expenses. You've been able to keep that levy below the capacity, which is not something a lot of towns do. They usually tax right to the capacity. You know, so it's good because the way you increase reserves is by tapping to the capacity, and then you move some of it into reserves, but the town hasn't had to use all of its capacity. So that's a good point I just wanted to make. The bond rating AAA, we talked about, one of 15 communities in the state. And the important thing to realize here is the massive amount of interest expense you're saving. What's that number, Brian? Something like 20 or 30 million bucks, right? Over the next 30 years. It's just
It'll be tremendous savings when we do the debt collision projects.
just enormous, yeah.
But one of the things that makes it more difficult for us to calculate is before we receive the AAA, even though we were AA plus, we typically always sold through into the market at the AAA rate. So getting the AAA rate, it's a little bit difficult to distinguish exactly what my savings is.
True.
But we know there are some savings. It's just for the longest time, even though we hadn't been granted the rate, people still viewed us as extremely stable and a AAA community. So we do believe there's savings. It's somewhat difficult to quantify, but we know that we're getting some of the most competitive rates. There was as an example, there was a $25 million bond deal that just sold today from Somerville, roughly similar to what we just permanently borrowed. And we got 3.137 as our net interest cost, and Somerville, which is AAA, same as us, received 3.339. So we know that there is some additional benefit to it, but it's not massive amounts of basis points savings, but there is some benefit.
Okay, and just important to last bullet point there that I haven't touched upon, just important to maintain where you're at, maintain the consistency in reserves. And you do that by continuing to forecast conservatively, be very diligent with your expense management, and it just falls to the bottom line every year. Okay, we've got some information items that are small on the screen. OPEB, okay.
Yeah, when I first got on the board, and this was early 2000s, the mentality was not to do it this way. And the reasoning was, oh, this is money that we should let the taxpayers keep their money. So they kept it like behind all the time. So it was almost a policy to not put money aside for a rainy day and not put it. It was very interesting, like the shift. And I always thought that was crazy. I said, that's not how I run my business.
No,
so I think we've really come a long way.
Yeah. OPEB has, especially since Brian's come on board, we have a prior history in another town where they had the same belief. It was always a battle to get some money into OPEB. And they even said it was fake at one point, that OPEB is fake. And
Not me. Not me that said that, believe me.
And I said, OPEB is not fake. People are living a lot longer than they were.
Yeah.
They are going to get health insurance benefits for a lot longer than you thought. And the pay-go is just not going to work. At some point, it's going to break, and it's going to be a budget breaker. So, so it's great that the town has taken on this policy of funding the OPEB, it's hard coded into the budget. What a lot of towns do is they say, hey, if we have enough money left over, we'll put a little bit into OPEB. Here, OPEB is a budget, it's a line, it's an
Yeah.
item in the budget.
Yeah.
So it's really, is a complete difference in philosophy at this point. So the county, pension is, actually the county is gonna be fully funded in 25. This is Nantucket County, right? Isn't it gonna be fully,
We're gonna
either
go before the
24 or
county.
25?
We'll go before the county commissioners at the last meeting in June and ask for authorization to transfer money from the county into the, we made a large transfer last year because their OPEB liability is about 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a large transfer last year and we have one remaining of about 150,000 to do this year. And then that will be able to be invested under the prudent investment strategy. And we will be able to, when those retirees get on the books, we'll be able to pay from OPEB rather than having it in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be able to just do the annual required contributions on a much smaller scale. So it'll be a big benefit for the county. You know, the town, we have $125 million liability. We have probably close to $8 million now in the OPEB trust fund. As everybody remembers, we have pension obligation bonds legislation. The plan is, if this ultimately makes sense and the longer it takes to get the legislation through, it may not make any more sense because of the timing anymore. However, regardless, the select board, when we adopted the financial policies, also adopted a policy directive that in 2038, when the pension system is fully funded, that savings between just the annual ongoing versus the catch-up provisions, that savings was then on an annual basis to be directed to OPEB. And we're projecting that annual savings will probably be about $2.5 million. So that will then start going directly into OPEB. So there's a plan to start funding at a higher level. It just takes time to get there.
And I think you're trying to convince the land bank to possibly.
I've been trying to convince the land bank and they're kind of on, even though they have massive reserves, don't want to do it. So
yeah.
I'm slowly working on them because I think it's a benefit and it'll be critical to the operations because, you know, as everybody does live longer, health insurance only getting more expensive and without having it funded, it puts a significant strain on all of the budgets as well as we get a more aging population.
And everyone just got cost of living adjustments and everything else. So it's gonna be a little tougher again. So.
But we've also been, so as Tony mentioned, as everybody in the room knows, there's 500,000 automatically in the budget in an article. The last couple of years, because we've had such substantial amounts of free cash, we've been allocating an additional 500,000 from free cash into that. So we've been over the last couple of years consistently putting $1 million into it during the times when we can, because I keep telling everybody, and someday it'll happen. Free cash is not going to continue to grow into the $20 and $30 million range for very long. It's going to start to level off as we use some of it for capital.
Right. Next, just network security, remain vigilant. Important awareness. I know there was a situation at the school during the year. So I put this in every presentation. It's an enemy. It's out there. It's not going away. So I always try to stay 2 steps ahead. And I think you've gone through a full security
we do
audit and scan, and
we do network penetration testing. We do phishing. Attacks to try to get to, not to try to trip employees up, but to figure out where we need to work and focus. And every employee has to go through it. And there's training all the time. And we've implemented every recommendation that's been made to us to date.
Okay. Next line, I thought I'd put it in here. It's not a finding or anything, just a nice informational item, is the investment income. $3 million in 23, and I think it's going to be more in 24.
Yeah, we're actually going to say that we're going to discuss this in the finance department update. But as of the April revenue collections for the month of April in the general fund, we've already hit $5 million in interest.
Wow.
And we are projecting that we'll probably hit about 5.9. And that is all credit to Mindy and her really understanding what the town's cash needs are on a weekly, bi-weekly payroll basis and really getting a good handle on what the collections are. And as people here are aware, we had a little hiccup with timing from the reval. So the tax bills actually were late. And even through that, we still managed to generate $600,000 a month in investment income with a extended due date to May 1st. So it really is a lot of testament to the work that she's put in to understand what our cash flow needs are. So
Yeah,
I can't say enough about that.
What's frustrating to me when I go to an audit, now I'm hired to do the audit. I'm not hired to invest your money and do any of that sort of stuff. But I know a little bit about investing. So when I go to when I see that a treasurer's got $10 million in a checking account earning less than 1%, I'm like, what are you thinking about? What are you doing?
Right.
You know, when anything 12 months or under is fair game for the general fund. So I tell them, do your cash forecast, figure out what your excess cash is. So here's what I need for payroll, bills. Here's what's coming in. What's my balance every month? And that's the number that's investable in a higher yielding. You always want to have flexibility to get to cash. So you don't want to lock it all up, but you say, okay, let me take 60% of that or 70% of that. But these treasurers, some of them don't get it. You're like, you just threw away $500,000 by not moving that over. Or they go out and do a big bond offering, and the project's not going to start for 12 months. Now they have to be careful about arbitrage, because you can't earn more on the bond, on the investment income than the bond is costing you. But you can at least offset part of that by saying, hey, they're not going to be building for a while. Our financial advisors told us to go get the bond now because the timing's good, but we're not building for a little bit. But they won't manage that money, and it's frustrating for me. And that's why, myself and Brian have had many conversations about this. The town's significant reserves has lent itself to creating a revenue producing asset, a significant revenue producing asset. So good job, you and your team on doing that. That's $5 million. That wasn't there 2 years ago because the interest rates were so low. And recognizing that and investing it the way you should. That's why I wanted to put it in here. It's not really a management letter item, but I wanted to at least give credit on this. Next slide. Okay, findings and recommendations. Okay. So the Chapter 90 reimbursement process, and I'm hoping that it's been corrected through hiring, new people to overtake the public works, but that's been broken for a couple of years. So the way Chapter 90 works, for those who don't know, you go out and you get a project approved from the state. The state allocates a certain amount to each town. And then within that, you can use that money for approved projects that you approve. So your public works person is going to submit and say, I want to do these streets. Are they eligible streets under Chapter 90? You get the okay. And then you go out and spend the money. The catch is you have to spend the money first, and then you ask for the reimbursement. And Nantucket's done some pretty good sized projects. So what you should be doing almost every month is looking at what you paid in construction, what's gone out the door, and fill out the form. Fill out the form, send it to the state. The state has made, in the old days, the state would take 8 or 9 months. They made a promise that if you get it to us, we're going to try to get it to you within 30 or 60 days. We're trying to get you the reimbursement. So this has kind of gone, not unnoticed. There's a big deficit sitting there. So felt we had to at least talk about it.
Right, and so it was about 1.3, and it actually is a hit to free cash if it's not. So I can tell you that about 435,000 of that was from the winter wrap program that we had to complete before June 30th. And then the state decided that they were going to pay us after June 30th. Okay. So it didn't come in the same time to offset it. We have received all the winter wrap money that we were entitled to offset that. And the remainder of this is were projects that 2 DPW directors ago started and never completed. And then the replacement started and never finished. And so the current DPW director and I, Drew, have already pulled all of the accounts, have pulled all the bills, and are getting the contracts and finalizing the reimbursement requests. So those are all going to be in process, so that this hopefully by June 30th will not be on there.
And how much of that was Mike Burns' being away and not
No.
back, because didn't he do it? He doesn't.
No, he doesn't
No?
do chapter 90, he does 3C grants.
Okay, he's doing that.
Chapter 90 was, is overseen by the DPW director.
Okay.
A lot of it was, paving of Mattocket Road,
Okay.
and some Pulpus Road work and some other interior work that was done, and some for, design of the bike paths, which was not, that was, or repairs on the bike paths. So, but Drew and I have gone through and we've pulled all the expenses from Munis for all of this that makes up that. And Drew has gone through and got all the invoices from his staff. We provided the contracts and now it'll just be getting my signature on it. So it is in process and we know it is important to get that taken care of. Because that'll immediately give us about $1.3 million in free cash on July 1st.
Yeah, and Drew is a Weston and Sampson guy.
So he
So he comes from a very knowledgeable company. So I'm confident he'll get this straightened out. One of the misnomers out there is you have to wait for the project to be finished before you can ask for the reimbursement, and that's wrong. You can ask for reimbursements every 30 days. Now, you're not going to ask for $10,000 or $5,000. It's not worth filling the paperwork out. But once it gets to a certain level, you should take the time, fill the paperwork out, get the money in the door. So, but I'm confident that that won't be there this year. There's always a deficit on June 30th, but there's a receivable
for
that comes in, and it has to come in within the 90 days after year end.
Actually, DOR has changed that because there's the funding commitment letters. They can call DOR and confirm that your reimbursement request has been in.
As long as it's in, right?
As long
Yeah,
as then
yeah.
we'll no longer issue
Yeah.
it all.
So it shouldn't be hitting free cash
No,
this year.
it should not.
The second comment here is the DESI chart of accounts, which is basically, DESI is the state Department of Education, and the school is required to file a report with them annually. And that's how your chapter 70 allocation is determined from the state. So you fill out this report, you send it in, we audit it, and then once all that's done, the state figures out how much you're gonna get. And they require the chart of accounts to be configured in a certain manner. And this is has been a finding basically due to your system. So the Munis system chart of accounts was designed years ago. And it's not an easy fix. It's something that takes a while. I think it's in progress, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong.
So I've put Martin in touch. We put a consultant in touch with Martin that does ERP transitions and things of that nature. They actually can do this work, and they're going to work with Martin to download the current chart of accounts, work with Martin to get it in compliance, and then we'll need Munis's help to upload it. And then when I talked to Tony about all of these, I don't know that will actually be done by June 30th, but it has been started, which has not been something that the school has been, they've been reluctant to undertake it on their own. So we've stepped in to kind of help shepherd the process, even though it's not my chart of accounts. We're going to help them get it taken care of and cleared. So that we're in compliance, because I don't want to have Department of Education decide to come down and say, we're not giving you chapter 17 money anymore because this isn't done.
Right.
So we are working with
Which will never happen, but you know, they just don't
put
want to
nothing
keep
past
seeing
anyone.
that finding.
Yeah, and this has been, I've noticed this has been ongoing for a number of
3 or
years.
4 years, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was gonna ask about it, good.
Next bullet point is water inventory. So for years, the water inventory was really not a material amount. So we weren't as concerned about it. And then probably 3 or 4 years ago, it started to spike. Back when Heidi had probably her last year, we noticed that it started to spike. So we said, hey, let's go take a look at what's down there. And there's some expensive inventory down there. It's, you know, we actually went through it, counted it with them, and found that they really weren't doing a count every you know, so often. So what they would do for inventory is whatever was on the books, say there was $500,000 on the books. If they bought 100,000, they'd add that and say it's 600,000. And then if they let 50,000 go, they'd reduce it. So they do it calculation, basically an accounting calculation. But what you have to do is, and this happens in industry a lot because they have big manufacturing plants in private. Doesn't happen a lot in municipal, but this has gotten to the level where you have to now prove that that 550 is accurate. So you go in and count it. Did somebody take some inventory? Are there procedures to protect the inventory? You know, what's out there? And this has been around for probably, I'd say at least 3 years. I'd like to see it corrected because it got over $1 million last year. And there was really not a lot of ways we could verify it. It got to be such a big number, so.
Right. So one of the reasons they got to be very large is that during COVID with the supply chain issues, the water company made a decision to stop buying meters and some other equipment that they needed for connections. We have had discussions with the water company. I'm actually meeting with them to ensure that we have proper year-end procedures to ensure the count. I think you're actually coming out this year to do a count.
We're gonna come down on.
Because I think we've decided that you need to do that. Because
Whatever
of
the
value. Secondly, in conjunction with this, one of the big concerns is that there's a lot of that inventory that's left outside, not the meters themselves, but the piping and everything. And in this year's capital, Mark did get allocated $950,000 to build a building on the property to store the rest of that material in a more secure location. Him and I are meeting next week to discuss getting that building done and getting this all moved in, as well as reviewing the additions and the subtractions from the inventory to make sure that we're comfortable with where it is right now internally in my office, and also to help them as well with that. And we will be doing an account, hopefully maybe even the beginning of June as a start, and then we're going to do one before Tony and his auditors get here. A lot of it is the subtractions are related to actual job connections, so they have they do have a tracking of where the material is going, but I need to make sure that you've got better procedures in place to do it. And the first thing is getting all that stuff locked up so there's less access to it.
And will that end up being like quarterly or half a year? Like what will that?
Well, my goal actually, since I did work briefly in the private sector with some valuable pieces of inventory and the parts associated with them, is my goal would be, I would like to institute what's known as cycle counts, where the software will spit out a list of serial numbers, especially like in the water meters, and you'll go and verify that that actually still exists, so that it's done on a monthly basis. So hopefully by the end of the 12-month cycle, you've counted everything that's installed. And then it's really looking at the pipe and saying, okay, here's the value. Do we have that value of pipe here? So it is, with the really expensive pieces, especially the water meters, I want to do it on a cycle count basis so that we have much greater control, because those are very valuable and very expensive.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that?
No.
Okay. Next is there's a band premium account. It's grown to a 1.1 million. It's sitting as a liability. And the rules on band premium have changed a lot over the last few years with the Municipal Modernization Act and some other revisions to that. And this goes back quite a bit. And so I thought it was worth mentioning, let's take a look at when this happened, if we could, and figure out how to use it. A band premium you get when you do a borrowing. In the old days, you'd have to amortize it. So you bring it in, and then you amortize it. So you recognize it as income over the life of the bond. The newer ones you can put directly to the project. You can lower the borrowing. So there's a few things you can do with the newer ones. And just wanted to, it's a big number. It could be income. Those offerings could be dead at this point. They're already done, so it could be pure income to the town. So
yeah, so everything is pre-2016. We've gone through and
Okay.
verified that. And when municipal modernization came in, what we do with all the excess premium is we resize the issue to bring down the borrowing cost. That's the way we do it. And everything in there does not have to be amortized. The only part that would have had been amortized before 2016 was maybe anything with a debt exclusion, but we were already doing that. So this is all just premium that could be. What we will likely do, and you won't see this until next annual town meeting, just so everybody's aware. But next annual town meeting, when we go through the capital program committee, we'll make a recommendation that we use this as a funding source, because it can be used for projects of similar length and similar projects. And we have enough projects on the books that we can transfer this and bring down the cost of capital projects for next year's annual town meeting for 26 capital projects. So it will be cleared out by the end of 2025, but it'll still reside in 24. But that's the plan that we've developed to use.
Okay.
yeah, that's a good problem to have. The next one is stagnant balances. So these are balances that you start something in the special revenue fund, the revolving, or you get a gift, or you got a grant, a mitigation fund. There's a bunch of things that you spend for the purpose, but then the spending is done and it sits there. Or there's coding errors. It might have got, the expense may have gotten, like a police gift expense might have got posted to the general fund by accident, and it should have gone against the gift account. So a number of years ago, probably 17 or 18, we did it in 18. And close to what, $1 million, I think that.
So when we had this discussion before, yeah, so in 2018, Tony and his staff and myself talked about this. We looked at a lot of them. There was a lot of multiple year of no activities. We highlighted them all. The town manager and I went through it. We had some discussion where there was some uncertainty with departments, and then everything else we took back to free cash. And it was about just under $1 million that went back into free cash from closing these out. We were actually, before the prior assistant town accountant left almost 2 years ago. Now it is 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it's gone by so quickly. This was something that we were actually going to undertake, but with the transition and everything, it did get a little delayed, and that is on me for that. But it's something we have actually already started, and by June 30th, we will have taken the stagnant balances back that we can, and directed departments to use the money if they can. But there'll be a decision point for all of the stagnant balances on what we're doing.
How many accounts make up the bulk of the amount? Is it, are you having to investigate 70 or you investigate 20?
It's probably close to 70, or it's probably close to 70, I think, isn't it, Tony? Across the
86.
I know there's 86 accounts, but I can't imagine all 86 accounts are $17,441. I divided. So
no, they're very
it's actually 1.5 million. Stagnant right now.
Over a period of years. So
no, I know that, but I was just trying to decide, do you have to get through 40 accounts to get 1.2 million, or do you have to go through 86 accounts because they're all of equal value?
Well, that was
my question.
I know a couple of them are things that I know probably weren't charged incorrectly. I would say to get the majority of the 1.5, we probably have to go through 50%, or right around 50% of it. However, we are going to go through all 86.
Sure. No, but I was just trying to get the size of the prize in terms of the effort behind it. Okay.
And
Thank you.
There's been some legislation on like mitigation accounts and things like that. So if there's mitigation accounts in there, Brian, I'm not sure. And I know the first time there were. So mitigation account is when National Grid, for example, comes in and rips up, things that you have to fix. Mm-hmm. They'll give you $100,000 or $50,000 to say, hey, you guys take care of it. Don't come, don't come to us. And what's the problem with that is you sometimes it's already fixed and it kind of gets forgotten in the special revenue fund and never gets used. So the first time around there were a few of those, but Brian's indicated those aren't the case. And
most of it is gifts and
grants,
and people don't remember that they got it, and then
or turnover. You got a turnover in a department head, and they lose track of the next one. They're not going to say, "Hey, we got all these gift accounts, public works that we can spend, or police that we can spend." So
the goal this year is to we're developing a process internally, but to get through the 86, recoup as much as we can, identify what that we have an ongoing need for, and then annually it'll be down to maybe 5 or 6 or 7 that we actually have to review on an annual basis and decide what to do. So the goal is to clear it up, and then for June of 24, and then continue with the process that just reviews them either quarterly or solve that.
Yep, thank you.
And I think, Maria, we've already started having our internal staff start to look at them, right, and clear it up. So
do the department heads who are, when the gifts come in, like the Salt Marsh, do they get an update of this is what you have that's been dedicated to?
Admittedly, we have to be better about that. We don't myself probably does not do a good job of making sure that we're communicating with them those balances, but that is also going to be part of this as well.
Okay, yeah, because that's come up when I've gone to the senior center. They're like, this money gets donated, we don't know what happens to it.
Which is actually kind of interesting because they send us the stuff and then they say the gift is to buy 50 checkerboards and then they know that they need them. They know what the gift is for. They don't, and then sometimes there's not necessarily, it's communication. We have to do a better job. But there's sometimes lack of follow through once they get it about what they need it for and never actually going out and doing it. And that doesn't really follow the responsibility for us, but we can do a better job of communicating.
And the last bullet is payroll testing. So every 3 years, we do a deeper dive into payroll, where we'll actually go into the files and make sure everything's there, your W-4s, your ethics certifications. The last time we did that, there were some things missing in the files, so we pointed it out. I know with turnover in the office and everything, what I had made a recommendation is that the finance department basically replicate what we do almost on an annual basis, just make like an audit of the files, just to make sure everything's in there, everything's appropriate, everything's updated. So we will be doing that test again in 24. So hopefully, you know,
we I think that we're doing a better job. I hope it's perfect, but we're auditing them now as we're entering them into Munis as part of a new hire to ensure that everything is there, and we don't enter them unless all the documentation exists. So we believe that this has been corrected, but as you know, there's turnover and people get sent to us at the last second and have to be there because they've already been working. So we've worked hard to correct this, the HR director and myself. I do think it has been corrected, but we'll find out.
Is someone managing like the ethics?
Yes,
HR process.
does.
So they're doing that. Okay, they are perfect.
So they send out a reminder if you haven't done it.
So,
Not that you ever needed a reminder, Brian.
Oh, I need a lot of reminders actually, but hopefully not with that one.
I believe I saved.
So you're
Save this one for last because it kind of covered a lot of things. So, because the town has just got so many revolving activities and different revenue sources, you're always going to have a lot of receivable management that needs to take place. People don't, most of your cash that comes in is not just someone coming in over the counter. They're actually billed and they're required to send the money in. So we've noticed that that these have gotten high. They've gotten they've grown to a little bit every year, to the point where I said we got to really, you know, kind of look at this and see if we can manage it, see if we can write some of these off. They're not needed. The ambulance is very high. So I mean, if you want to take one at a time, Brian, as you do this.
So we've been in contact with Star. And I've talked to both the deputy chief, who has experience with this and came from, and the chief Branson. We actually are going to explore a couple different things, and this part of this does go in with the landfill, but I'll discuss the landfill a little bit more in a second as well. We're looking at, specifically with ambulance, we're going to do one of two things. We're either going to turn the approximately 900,000 over to what's known as FFR, which is collections, and allow them to try to do it. But typically with ambulance bills and things of that nature, you're only going to collect, they do it between 5 and 10%, which is basically 45 or 90,000. What I thought of and what I talked to Tony about, and we were going to do this with some of the landfill as well, is we want to see if we can actually sell these to a factoring receivable company that may pay us 30 cents on the dollar, and we walk away from there with a substantially larger amount, not all of it, but we also don't have to deal with the collections and try to get it. And if they're able to collect it, great. If not, that's their figure out what to do, and it'll clear it up. Specifically with the ambulance, I think a lot of it may be, I don't know whether we'll ever collect it. The landfill, the amount is, a lot of it is what happened before. So finance department took over billing for the scale and collection of that from all the companies on island that utilize it. Because what was happening before that was, it was at DPW, but they weren't really doing anything in terms of making sure the company existed, or it was a company that came in for one day and left, and they'd get $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 worth of credit, and they could just charge away. Now, every new account starts with, I think it's $500 as the limit, and we have to see a progressive nature of charging and paying and charging and so when we took it over, we've implemented these types of things to try to minimize that. And the staff there was Eve, who would then transition upstairs, but we have this wonderful individual downstairs named Michael that is actually doing it. So there's a lot better control of the process now. A lot of the receivables prior for landfill literally is a company coming over for one job, going there, basically doing up the charge, leaving, and then never being able to find them after that. And there's a lot of that. So there's a lot that probably is absolutely not collectible, which is actually not good because we provided the service and we paid for it all and we're still trying to get it, which is why we're looking at essentially being able to sell those to a receivable company and let them try to deal with it, and we'll get whatever they offer us and try to recoup some of it at this point. But we do recognize that they need to be addressed, and the chief and I with the ambulance have certainly been looking at it, and internally I'm downstairs with the collector talking about landfills, the receivables all the time. So we have taken the DPW completely out of billing and collection because we have the staff downstairs that can do it. And one of the things that we also do on the list is we look, because you can lien these landfill pieces to the tax bill if they own property. So every time I get an email that says, hey, this person's coming in, they're paying their bill timely and everything, can we increase their credit, or they'd like to get credit? I say, do they own property and are they current? Because that's one step to look to make sure that we're minimizing their risk.
So it works out to be, when I add up all those numbers, it's about 4% of the town's revenue number for this year. Where is that, Tony, in relation to other municipalities?
Ambulance is not good anywhere.
Okay.
It's just something that's very hard to collect. It's complicated because you've got insurance companies involved, and the fire chief like to hold on to it as long as possible because they're like, yeah, we'll eventually get it from Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or whoever the carrier is, Tufts. But at some point, I've had towns scrub it, and they found that the people have died. And,
Sure.
There was never any medical lien. Not that I'm suggesting you put a medical lien on the.
No.
I don't recommend that anywhere. It's almost like a nice service, a humanitarian service, and then you're going to start putting medical liens on. I don't recommend that. If you can get it from the insurance company, that's great. But like I said, it's a problem in a lot of places, and so this is you're not alone here on any of this. You're not alone. The landfill is unique to you folks. Not too many people do that. But credit balances, those are just old things that are overpaid.
Yeah, so the credit balance is actually, so I like this because people are paying the bill, but there's a substantial amount of the residents on the island that just send large checks to the water company. Okay, and they just leave them there, $1,000, $2,000, and then we just expect it to be applied every month against the bill. We have had a conversation with the water company and told them that it's a liability to be holding all these people's money all the time, and that I don't really approve of the practice because I just don't think it's the way we should be operating with massive credits on the receivable listing.
Yeah.
So they have been going through the list, and they have been, some of it is just that it's a credit on the water side, but there's a sewer bill that just needs to be applied against that hasn't, so that's going to eliminate a lot of the credits that are there. But there are credits where people just wrote a check. It's just, well, I get a water bill every month, so just write a check for $1,000, and when it's done, I'll write another big one. The water company is getting away from this, and they're starting to return these, or they're starting to send this money back so that we're eliminating keeping these large amounts of money on the books. Because one of the things I don't like about it is at the end of every year in June, I have to go through and manually add up all the credits and then do a journal entry so that accounts receivable is actually reflective of what accounts receivable are. And it's a lot of work to go manually through. And so, and I don't think it's a good practice to just let people keep sending money all the time for no apparent reason when there's no bills due. So we are working on it. The water company recognizes it, and it's been a long-standing practice there that we're trying to work with them to kind of shift the way that people are thinking.
I think it's a long-standing Nantucket practice.
Possible that
People do it at the pharmacy, they do it at the dry cleaners.
They go away for the winter and they don't want to have to,
Yeah.
they don't collect their stuff here,
Right.
But I think with municipal bills, at least, now that you can pay them online and there's numerous ways to do it, I don't think that there's a need for that type of, that
Mhm.
activity to continue. And we're trying to just change people's mindset. It's not gonna change everyone, but to the extent we can, we are.
I would think if they're told, they'd stop doing it.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah,
Because
actually the opposite. I would-
because the credit balance is a liability, so Brian's correct, you have to
Right.
go through and pull it out.
Plus just the accounting for it, pain in the neck. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just makes things more complicated.
We do, this happens with property taxes too. People come in June and pay, they just wanna pay their first quarter of 20, like, for 25. And I've seen it more recently. Like last year, I think we had close to $2.5 million of what we have to call unearned revenue that we have to take out of
Yeah.
receivables because people have prepaid fiscal 24's tax bills, the two preliminary bills. And I'm not sure I'm ever gonna stop all of it, but we do discourage it to the extent we can.
Yeah, in the old days, when you got to deduct the taxes on your Schedule A, it was really bad.
We used to get a lot in December, with massive amounts of repayments. For
Let me pay the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Worth.
I did that before they changed everything. I'm guilty.
That was
Before
big,
they changed
right?
all the rules, I
Because
brought.
they changed it on January 1st, so there was
Yeah.
a mad rush. All my clients had credit balance. It was
Oops.
a nightmare. So the old delinquent balances really relate to your boat excise, motor vehicle, personal property. Those go back, I think personal property goes back a long time.
So we're kind of unique in a couple, we're unique in two ways. We have a lot of boats, okay? And we have a lot of personal property. And the interesting thing is for both of these, boat excise tax, unlike motor vehicles, which we can mark at the registry and people can't re-register their vehicles, or we can turn it over to the deputy collector. There is no method in the statute for boat excise that allows us to do anything to a person who's registered a boat if they don't pay the excise tax, which is kind of a flaw in allowing me to have a tax or an excise tax that I have no viable means to collect. Personal property is really the same thing. And I will tell you, my prior community that I was in, we had maybe $5,000 of personal property tax on an annual basis, because personal property tax here is really related to what businesses have for displays and the things in their business, but it also is calculated for anybody who had their the personal property tax also extends to your second residence. So if it's not your primary residence, so everybody who owns a second home here all gets personal property tax bills for the contents of the home. We do not go through and try to figure it out. We send lists out, not everybody returns them with what they have. So generally the standard is it's a percentage of the assessed value, very small percentage, but that bill. And again, there is no, you can't lien these, you can't lien these and put them into tax liens. So they sit there, and a lot of them we think are basically people sold the house and moved and just never paid them. So we're going through the list. There is a process for specifically for more so personal property than boat excise.
Yeah.
Personal property, we have to go through the list. The collector is working with it. And then she has to certify to the assessor that we have exhausted all available means, and we do not believe that these are valid collectible bills at this point. And then we can abate them. Okay. Now, abating them doesn't mean that we never can collect them, because if somebody say, you know, I found an old personal property tax bill and realized I never paid it and I went down, we can recommit it and we can collect them. So it doesn't, it still is able to be collected. It's not going to sit there showing us this massive amount of money that is outstanding. We will keep the list internally. It just doesn't show up anymore. Motor vehicle excise, we did this a couple of years ago. There was a lot of them. We are writing them off, even though they have all been transferred to the deputy collector. Okay, so they'll be cleared from here from the account receivable and deferred revenue list, but it doesn't mean that they still are not owed. And like any of these, okay, and specifically with motor vehicles, because it's at the deputy collector, he's still actively trying to collect them. And we have done this over, you know, we did this a couple of years ago when I think we removed 10. We were going on, I think we had all the way back to like 1984 for motor vehicle.
Yes.
Okay. And most of it's probably people moved, they sold the car, they forgot to deal with it. Okay. So we removed quite a few of those. And then miraculously, I don't even know what happened, but then we had all these people start coming in and they're realizing, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't register the car because I moved back and I have this old bill. So we got a lot of recommitments over the time. So what we're going to do is we're gonna go all the way back, I think, to 2018 is gonna be the most recent year that we keep on the books. We're gonna engage this procedure, but they still reside with the deputy collector for motor vehicles. So motor vehicles is the one that I'm the least concerned about, because eventually if you try to do something with that vehicle, we are gonna catch up to you. And then annually after that, we'll remove the oldest year so that we're keeping current with it. But unfortunately, motor vehicles is the only one we really have great power to enforce collectability, personal property, and boat. The legislature didn't see fit to give us a method to really collect it. If somebody just doesn't pay it. So.
Do we check when people try and renew their mooring permits? Are we allowed to attach it to that? I mean, not everybody has a mooring permit. They might put it on a trailer, but.
We, so any town issued permits, there is a provision in the bylaw that would prevent, I'd have to look at specifically which permits. I don't know if mooring is in there, but we do, the building department does look, we do send out a list for people to know who's delinquent, so that if they come to get specified permits, that they can't get them until it's paid. I don't know the answer to whether mooring is on that list. I have to look, but if it is, we would certainly enforce it.
Yeah, I was just thinking mooring in town pure lottery would be good, are good catch points.
Yeah,
but probably a lot of the boat things are boats that have been sold or scrapped or.
Sit in somebody's backyard.
Yeah.
On the personal property front, does the collector actually rebill those or not?
yeah, we send them in. We send all of the
So like once a year,
we continue to send us notifications.
Okay.
I mean, we are different than a lot of communities, as everybody understands, in that we have so many second residences. We have a lot more personal property than a lot. Probably one of the larger ones that you guys do.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the amount of second homes here that are all.
Yeah, Falmouth has the same issue.
Yeah, so a lot of the Cape communities will have it, but not a lot of other communities in Massachusetts have.
So only
this.
second homes have personal property tax.
Any home that is not your primary residence, so,
Okay.
you know, I'd say second, third, fourth, fifth.
Right,
more than
right.
that.
Well, that's what I
So
meant.
if you own more than-
Primary residents
yeah,
don't have personal.
primary residence is exempt, any other residences
Okay.
do get personal property tax bills.
When I lived in Virginia, every house got a personal property tax.
So they're gonna do that, I want a way to collect it, other than having to just
So
run around.
there is something in the law that allows you to exempt up to $10,000 in value. So if it's up to 10,000, it has to go through a town meeting vote. You can exempt that from personal property tax. And a lot of towns, I think probably about 33% of the towns in Mass have adopted that.
Okay,
You don't lose the tax, it gets spread over the rest of, and it becomes almost a rounding error for the rest of the tax base. So what I normally seen towns do is they have the assessors run a report to say, hey, if we adopted this less than 10,000 rule, how many bills are we gonna eliminate? And we're not really losing a tax. And so I don't know, a lot of them say it's gonna be a political nightmare. So they've avoided it because of that. You know, some are saying, why should I pay tax and this one not pay tax? I don't care how much it is. But there are some options to make it more manageable.
Yeah, I think you and I briefly talked about that.
Yeah.
Recently, so we will talk to the assessor to see what it would do. I mean, we have the residential exemption, so I don't think that people would probably be happy if we helped make a little bit of an accommodation, did it, but we could look into it. We should look into it.
Yeah, only if it's gonna make your life easier.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what, you know, if you're
Maybe
not
the
gonna,
personal property in its entirety would be a lot easier, but.
In some towns, believe it or not, the personal property is so low, because this is in the little stores,
Yeah,
that they eliminate like 90% of the bills. But the tax is like nothing.
right,
But they're eliminating that $18 bill that goes out every quarter.
yeah,
That the it's easy to forget to pay it.
and it costs more than that to process.
And to process it and everything else. So, so it's worth looking into, having the assessor run some lists and maybe making the process, like I said, a little more manageable.
does it do, if something happens to a house, for example, as a fire, does the insurance company look to see how much someone had it insured for? Like, what were they paying on their personal property? Because I know the insurance does never want to pay anything. Like,
I think if people probably just have contents insurance up to a certain value.
so they do that. They're not,
Yeah.
if they're not making a case against them or anything, there's no advantage. I know friend of mine was in, I think it was Marion, Mass. and they raised money by valuing the personal property better. I don't know how they did it, but they went out and
They enforce the list. You're supposed
Yeah.
to fill out a
A form of list.
Form of
but Not
list.
everybody does or returns it.
so nobody returned. You guys send it out, but no, not everybody
We send it
returns
out, and very few
Yeah.
people ever send it back.
So on there, you're supposed to list. And
Yeah.
you
How many
certify,
televisions do you have?
you
and-
certify that they're what I
Paintings
own.
and
Huh?
Furniture and.
Yeah,
stuff.
all the way down to like your china and your artwork, everything.
Ah, it's
I don't remember ever seeing one of those.
you wouldn't,
Because
you wouldn't get it
the
because you're
primary
invest.
home-
Do you have a
Right.
second home?
No, well,
On your
I've
other-
owned more than one residence on the,
Okay.
like, at a time, but my current residence is owned by a corporation. So, and it's not an STR.
Not yet.
The tax liens I put on here because it's improving.
Mhm.
It's gone from 3 million to about 2 million, so that's improving that process.
Yeah, this has been, the treasurer and I had numerous discussions about this. Okay, it was pretty high. We still have to do some review because some of the actual parcels that are in tax title.
Land of
are
low
most
value,
likely
yeah.
underwater at this point.
Yeah.
And we have got, and it, to write it off is gonna require us to take a hit to revenue somehow, and we need to figure out exactly how we wanna do that to clean. But we had a discussion about how to get to the list, get through some of this, because there's a lot of it. We have engaged Copeland and Page. And this is gonna sound scarier than it is, because we've not gone that far with anyone. We have done title searches on numerous amounts of the properties, and we have, the treasurer sent out a letter last September, or August, gave everybody 3 months to come in and talk to her about the balance. And set up a payment plan or pay it in full. And so there was a couple people, in the letter it said, we're gonna turn it over to KP, and we're gonna take you to land court, and we're gonna begin foreclosure proceedings. Now, I will say now and forever, we would never intended to foreclose on anyone, unless it was the most extreme egregious case. But the getting them to that step of actually, and we did have to file in land court with a couple people. However, it got everybody to come in and start getting into payment plans or bringing their balances current. We have properties, there's one that I'll share with you. We have started that process and it'll go nowhere, and we will never get it out of tax lien status because it's a property in Tom Nevers. That it is, the owner is one of 6 or 7 siblings. The one that we were able to talk to doesn't care about the property, doesn't want the property, and doesn't care what we do. Said you can foreclose on it and be done with it. However, if we actually want to do it, we have to find every
Yeah.
single heir.
Yeah.
And when we got the estimate for KP Law, it was about $200,000 to do it, to collect $70,000.
Yeah,
And at that point, I said, okay, we're just done.
yeah,
I am not gonna bother with this property because it doesn't make any sense.
no.
So we have a few of those in there,
Mhm.
but the majority of them.
Is that a recurring tax?
Yeah, they continue to get billed every year and we continue to put the next year into tax.
So it's up to
offset.
70 now, not 70 a year.
No, it's 74,000 and counting, because I think it's accruing $6 or $7 a day in interest right now.
So when it gets to 200, we can get KP.
Well, when it gets to 200, it may be worth it. But we have people
Isn't it-
interested in it, abutters are interested in it, and I can do nothing. Because I'm not gonna spend the money to try to find every
Right.
single error.
Who's the guy who does that? That does all the research? He said, I've talked to him before. I can't remember his name. He sits in the deeds and
I haven't seen him in a long time.
I haven't either. but-
Oh,
Not-
he did the airport,
Since his
right?
daughter died,
All right.
The other thing
I have
too
not
that
seen it.
makes this less,
David.
I don't wanna say less viable is, but there was a Supreme Court ruling, and there's been a Supreme Judicial Court ruling that basically says that if a town forecloses on a property and sells it, we're only allowed to keep the amount of the tax and not the equity that's accrued in the property. And before those two rulings, communities used to go and foreclose on properties because they could sell it at tax sale and the entire proceeds they were keeping, so.
Yeah.
It would be good to do it, but I don't know that we really want to get to that
Mhm.
point. But like I said, a lot of the people that we sent those letters to have ultimately come in, and the goal is to just get them on a payment plan to help get them caught up.
Mhm.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I was asking, because I think a lot would, He used to do it for
Brown.
Bruce Poor.
Brown.
Yeah,
Is
and
that the gentleman that did it at the airport property?
I think he did, yeah. But I think there's some people who have done a ton of work and might have all of it. So instead of KP digging in, depending where it is.
Yeah.
It might be sitting in someone's drawer somewhere with, but anyway.
So I know that, some of these are certainly, first of all, I want to thank all of my staff because I think they do a really great job.
Mhm.
And they're really focused on making sure that everything is recorded correctly and what's going out the door is proper and that all the departments that we help are doing things correctly. The only point that I would make is this is, it's better than it's been in the past, but it's still things that we need to work on. We have a lot, like every department with transition, Maria has done a tremendous job stepping in as the assistant town accountant as well. But obviously it's only 2 years in and there's an awful lot that we're still working through. I think she's done a great job in moving forward and trying to understand how all of it works. This is kind of the next step now that we have a full staff, is to really start to focus on these things that they don't seem like a lot, but at the end of the day, they make a big difference by, the more receivables we clear out, that generates free cash, it generates retained earnings for departments. So it really is kind of the focus moving forward. But I think with a full staff, we can really focus on that. And like I said, everybody does really try hard in my office to make sure that things are done correctly. So I appreciate all of their efforts. So, yes.
Well, Brian, I'll say, I used to be the general auditor for a $20 billion company and none of this got me excited. Not a single thing. I was like, this is straightforward, not hard to clean up. There's no critical management comments in here. There's no completely defective controls identified. I wouldn't lose sleep over this one for sure.
One of the good things about this is a lot of it is revenue producing, receivables.
Yeah. There's an upside to all of it.
Yeah, there's definitely, if it's fixed, it's gonna help free cash.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention, Sue has done a lot of work too, having been a finance director previously as well, and working with, myself working with Maria, but Sue looking at things from a little bit different experience and working together to really focus on these and identify processes and ways to move forward. So I do want to thank you as well, Sue.
I mean, really full marks, Brian, to you and the team for having us in such good shape.
It's an entirely different world.
That's what I understand, because I've only known Brian land.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you don't know that.
But it was still in cleanup phase.
Yeah.
I've only known Brian land, so I'm like, hey, this is good. So.
Well, the staff does the majority of the work. I'm the recipient of Tony and the understanding of where it's come from and everything, but it's really the staff who is the one that takes the commitment that I ask from them and really enforces and does it. So it's a team effort, and I appreciate it all from all of you. But I want to make sure that I recognize that, because without them, this wouldn't be possible.
Understood. Tony, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So we'll do this again tonight. I don't know if you.
I won't be there. I will be.
You'll do the shorter version.
We have
The
house
the
guests
bridge.
that I was able to sneak out from, so that arrived this morning.
I
I'm
think
like,
it's
oh, I gotta
important
go to
that we do
Barney's and buy.
I do think it's more important that we do the longer version here, so that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
we all have
absolutely.
an opportunity to ask and really get into understanding what's going on. I don't plan on going through every one of these on what we're doing.
And whoever can preface tonight by saying we discussed it this afternoon.
Yeah.
and ask questions.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Nice, thank you.
Oh, yeah. You
Move
need
to
a
adjourn.
active second. All in favor?
I
He was the.
was I supposed to, okay.
We took over for you.
You weren't here.
We double teamed it.
Team chair.
So thank you, and I'll see both Dawn and Matt tonight.
And Elizabeth.
Thank you, and enjoy.
Yes.
Fun.
Yeah.